Hey, welcome back. Oh man, glad to have you here. Today, we have an outstanding author. You know, I like my authors. I like my writers who can write, who can make people want to read. This author can do exactly that. My name is Vin DeQuino. Her name is Deborah Rafferty Oswald.
Hi.
Debbie, what a pleasure to have you here.
Thank you.
You've written a wonderful book, but tell me about you. When did this writing start?
I've been writing my whole life. I grew up in Mayapack. I wrote for the Mayapack Middle School newspaper. I wrote for Drumbeat, the Mayapack High School literary magazine. Then I moved to Brewster in 1991, and someone gave me a copy of the Brewster Centennial book just to get to know Brewster.
Yeah.
And I was enthralled with the local personalities, the local characters. I then began enjoying the historical articles in the Putnam County Courier, and I was particularly inspired by a picture of some young ladies at the Drew Seminary for Ladies in Carmel.
Oh, yeah.
Around the turn of the century.
That's got amazing history.
Yes. And there was a particular student who was noticeably younger than the other women in the picture, and I was like, what's her story? So I then started researching the Drew Seminary. I started researching Brewster, Carmel, and Mayapack at about the World War I years. Those are the years that really captured me.
That's a big thing right now. I know the Historical Society and people in town are going full-fledged on the World War I, trying to let people understand what happened and what our involvement was, what people from around here had to do with it.
It's 100 years, because United States became involved in 1917.
Wow.
And the more I researched about the women's suffrage movement and about Putnam County's role in the war and what was going on at the time, there was just so much history happening that I knew that's where the story would have to take place.
And you're a teacher.
I am. I teach fifth grade in the North Salem School District. So I'm inspired on a daily basis by my students. So it's every day they give me fresh ideas.
So important for kids to learn about our past.
Yes.
You know, my favorite quote by me is, if we do not teach the children of yesterday about their tomorrow, we are cheating them out of their tomorrow.
Yes.
So the children of today have to learn about their yesterday to make their tomorrow better.
I agree. Well said. Yes.
It has to happen. You know, and so, you know, it's like the old song, they're knocking down history to build parking lots.
Yes.
So it's good to connect them. You know that I'm very involved with Sybil Ludington.
Love the book.
And, you know, and she's a symbol. And our kids just have to know that gender doesn't separate heroes. There's women heroes, there's men heroes, there's children heroes. And we have to celebrate all our heroes.
Yes.
Put them on pedestals. So you wrote a book.
Yes.
And that book is called The Girls of Haviland. Let's show them the cover.
This is The Girls of Haviland.
Yep, there we go. And The Girls of Haviland are about what, Deb?
It's set in 1918, and The Girls of Haviland...
And it's local, right?
It's local. Jay is a daughter of struggling immigrant farmers in Brewster, New York. The farm is on Brewster Hill Road, and her father's been thrown out of work, basically, because the Borden's Condensery, which used to buy milk from the dairy farmers, had just shut down.
Yeah, wow. That was a big change.
Yes. So her farm is struggling. It's almost in foreclosure. And Jay is a very bright girl and gets a scholarship to the Haviland Seminary for Girls, which is based on the Drew Seminary for Girls. She is a fish out of water. She's got a bad temper. She doesn't think before she speaks, and she gets herself in a whole lot of trouble.
I know a few of those.
She is bullied. She is harassed. She is coerced into cheating. She gets herself in a whole lot of trouble, but she befriends another outsider, Florence, who's ostracized because of her skin color. But no one messes with Florence. Florence knows who she is, and she shows Jay who she could be. Together, they work to solve this is a true fact. I got this from the Putnam County Courier archival.
So truth is kind of intermixed in this
That's
fiction.
good historical
So it's not
fiction.
Totally fiction.
Correct.
Ah.
The first known person to commit suicide by jumping from a biplane was a Drew Seminary graduate.
Wow.
That inspired me to take the very contemporary issue of today's cyberbullying and bullying, and we do have a girl who, we don't know whether she fell or jumped to her death on Jay's farm in Brewster.
Wow.
And Florence and Jay go about trying to find out what happened to this young woman.
So there's mystery here.
There's a mystery.
And this is actually based at Drew Seminary.
Yes.
Yeah.
I call it Haviland because because it's historical fiction,
Okay.
but I did base it. The illustrator, Lisa Fields, who illustrated the cover, I gave her an actual picture of Drew Seminary, and that's why that's the school that appears on the cover.
Wow.
So there's mystery. It's coming of age. Jay comes from a dysfunctional family, abusive father. Many things that we can, teens can relate to today happen in this book, even though the setting is 100 years ago. And there's a twist at the end. We think we know who drove poor Violet to do what she did to end her life, but there's a twist at the end. So
Wow.
I lead you in one direction, but the end, you're like,
Don't give it away.
There's an aha. There is an aha moment.
Oh, good. Aha moments are good.
Yes.
When I work with writers, I tell them, don't be fooled. Nonfiction calls for a lot of research, but so does fiction.
Yes.
Talk to that.
It started, again, I would look forward to these, they were historic photographs called Glimpse of the Past that would appear in the Courier. I would cut them out, and then I would look through what happened 100 years ago today, and I would just find little clippings, and I saved them in a shoebox. Now, this was pre-internet, this research started, so I would actually bring my middle daughter, who was an infant at the time, I would bring her in an infant carrier and go to the basement, the downstairs of the Brewster Library.
I know. That place is amazing.
Yes,
They had newspapers in there.
That's what I used.
Actual newspapers.
That's what I used.
And I used to do that. I used to read the newspapers.
That's what I did.
Because there was information in there on Sybil. There was also information when I was doing Hauntings of the Hudson River Valley. There was information because that was the 1880s. And those papers were around.
Yes.
And it was amazing. And in the things for sale, same price as they are today.
That's the fun part.
Like you buy a car for like $50,
Yes.
I
When I do the research on the newspapers, I call it one-stop shopping for historical fiction writers, because not only did I find things that were happening at the Drew Seminary in Carmel, you knew the weather, you knew the price of a home.
And the way of life.
You knew
what
what was
people were
important.
doing, and they had little articles about this guy, got in trouble because his cow was in front of the store while he was in there shopping. It's wonderful stuff. And I used to go down in that Brewster basement.
That's what I
and just get lost down there.
That's where the book
and
happened.
There were times when I had to watch myself because I got so caught up in reading the articles.
Yes.
Some of them had nothing to do with what I was doing, but they were interesting.
They were very interesting.
Yeah.
I noticed, I found something that I think they called them a bunch of local hooligans at the time, and I guess they stole a car and drove it into a lake. So I used that in the book, only I have them crash through the ice on a frozen Lake Glenida. So the papers, the newspapers informed the novel, because every time I was looking for something else, I'd be like, this is wonderful.
Yeah.
So
I like to tell the story of the little boy at one of my talks who said to me, Mr. DeQuino, what do I do if I want to write a book that's real interesting, but my life is boring? And I said, listen, don't always write about what is. Write about what if.
yes, exactly.
So take something that happened and run with it. Give it its own ending. give it its own embellishments. So taking something that actually happened and working it into your book works.
It's so much fun.
You know, you don't have to take your life as it was. You could take it in pieces.
Yes.
In Kiss the Candy Days Goodbye, there's a scene in there where the boys are at their country house and they have an outhouse. And they have to go out in the night to go to the bathroom.
Yes.
And the two boys go with a lantern, and the older brother decides he's going to scare the daylights out of the boys. So he hides behind the outhouse. What he doesn't know is that the boys are carrying a hatchet.
Oh.
And he gets missed by about 6 inches.
Yes.
Really happened.
Yes.
That's what happened. So I took that scene and built it into the book. So I tell writers, when you go and you find those little stories, you can incorporate them into your plot line.
Yes.
You don't have to take it as it exactly happened. So you have some scenes in here that really did happen.
I have 2 people who were inspired by real people,
Wow.
too. There's the editor of the Brewster Standard. I call her Margaret Addison, but there was a Marjorie Addison. She was a female,
Wow.
and she was the editor of this Brewster
Wow.
Standard. And then I mentioned Edith Deal, who was a bookbinder. She was a local
Yes.
Brewster citizen, and she was involved in the World War I Women's Land Army experimental station up at Wellesley. And she's mentioned because Jay goes to a suffragette meeting.
I've come across her, I
So
have.
it's just like when you were talking about like strong female characters and heroines, these were real people. I
Yeah.
just tweaked them a little bit.
It's interesting because writers have different profiles. And one of the things that always fascinated me is that how writers are in many ways the same, but in many ways different. And I talk to writers about where they write, how they write, when they write. And it differs. You know, Patricia Riley Giff, who was a friend, and we worked together, not worked together, we went to a class together in the
Willie's
city.
Crossing.
The famous Bunny Gable, who ran a class at the New School. And this, a lot of well-known writers attended. And I said, Pat, when do you write? She said, middle of the night, in my nightgown. No, I'm sorry, not middle of the night, more in the morning. She said, I get up before the children. And I sit at the table in my nightgown and I write. And then when the kids get up, I do what I have to do to begin my day.
Yes.
And I said, oh, wow, I write in the middle of the night. Then I talked to other writers, and they said, oh, no, I write middle of the afternoon. And the ways of writing, the habits of writing, differ for different writers. When do you write?
I write outdoors. I have a front porch.
Oh,
I have
wow.
a Boston Terrier. I have usually a glass of iced tea, and I have my laptop right on the front porch
Wow.
because I teach, so summer is writing.
Yeah.
When I'm on school holidays and weekends, even if it's too cold, I have to be in front of a window because I
Wow.
have to
Be in touch with the
incorporate. I
outdoors.
have to be in touch with the outdoors
Wow.
so people can see what Brewster looked like and felt like, and what Lake Mayapack smelled like on a late summer afternoon, and the
Oh, yeah.
sunset over the lake. I have to that's another character in my story. The setting figures in just so people know
absolutely.
the Hudson Valley.
Absolutely. And this area is so beautiful.
Yes.
I mean, we really do have 4 seasons.
We do.
And that's what I just love about here. The also is the whole sense of just the feeling of what the community is here. And I know one of the things you try to do is capture the community of what it was. Is the Brewster of today anything like the Brewster of yesterday?
Yes and no.
Good.
Yes and
Good
no.
answer.
Yes. Strong community, yes. Lots of history, and I volunteer at the library in the summers.
Oh, that's great.
So I'm at a writing workshop at Southeast Museum. So there are opportunities to learn Brewster's history. You just have to look for them, but the community is always there, very strong, usually through sports and schools.
Yeah. So, so then some writers say, okay, I write from 8 o'clock to 10 o'clock. Do you have set hours that you?
I write on weekends.
Okay.
I write on
Yeah,
weekends.
I used to do that. I used to, because then I'd write at night, because I was a teacher, I was a coach, I had so many other things, and the kids were young, so keeping up with the kids was never easy. And, you know, there's so many other things. You know, I like to tell people that I think I was ADHD growing up because, you know, I did like 5 things at once. The only difference was I actually finished what I started.
Yes.
But I had to do 5 things. I still today do the same thing. You know, I'm everywhere doing everything. But there has to be a time when you focus. So for you, your focusing writing time was summer, weekends,
Really?
summer and weekends?
Yes, if I know, I'm sure you do this too. I'm never without a notebook. So one of my favorite characters, I found her waiting for a pizza. I just looked at her face. She had like this perfect Roman nose. Never met the woman, never set eyes on her, but I'm constantly people watching. I'm observing behaviors.
Absolutely.
And that's where
One of
I
my
get
favorite things to do is go to Ocean City, Maryland.
Yes.
I sit on the boardwalk and I watch the people go by.
I do the same thing.
I could do that for hours.
Yes.
And you watch so many different, you see mothers and fathers with kids.
Yes.
You see kids. You see everything and everybody. And everybody has a story.
They do.
Now, that's interesting because another good friend of mine, Roberta Silman, wonderful writer, wonderful. And she's a very good friend. And I say, Roberta, all my settings are real. I have to see the setting in my head. When I did Kiss the Candy Days Goodbye, I went to the hospital in the city and I sat in the emergency room and watched what happened there. I walked through the halls. I walked down the sidewalk at the school where it's supposed to be taking place, and I watched the kids play, and I listened to the bells, and I looked at all the brownstones so that I could see what I needed my reader to see. I said, "Do you do that, Roberta?" She said, "No." I said, "No?" She said, "No, but my people are based on people I know. They're real people." I said, "What?" She said, "Yours aren't?" I said, "No, I can't do that because the people would keep getting in the way of the story. I need my people. My people are usually combinations of several people. So different writers have different ways to approach it. So your people are real, but your settings are also, right?
Yes, my
Wow.
people, just like you, are combinations because
But your storyline
yes,
is fictional.
yes,
Yes. So there you go. So writers are different. So writers ask me all the time, how do you do it? Do you write? Do you do an outline when you write your book? Do you?
I tried. It doesn't work for me.
Me neither.
I use bullets. I go through the newspaper, and when I see something, I bullet
That's
it.
great.
And then the newspaper provides a chronological timeline for me because I can see
nice.
that they were short on coal deliveries in January, and this event was happening. There was like I knew when like trout season started, so the newspapers helped me.
April 1st.
Yep. Yes. So it helped.
I was there.
Me. Yeah.
Yeah, so, yeah, that's important. And see, for me, I don't have an outline, but I have a beginning and middle and an end that changes when I write.
Me too.
You know,
Sometimes
I
the
get going, and then
characters-
all
yes.
of a sudden, I go, whoa. I'm as surprised as anybody else. Someone said to me, what do you like about writing? I said, the fact that I'm the first one to read it.
Yes.
You know, I don't know what's going to happen until it happens.
The characters sometimes let you know
Yeah,
what's
the
going to
character.
happen.
And
They-
that is, you know, I tell writers that if you could reach that moment where your character is writing the book, then you have arrived. I mean, there's times when I would sit down at 6 o'clock after dinner when I was teaching, and my wife would tap me on the shoulder and say, you better take a shower. You have to go to work in another hour. I say, whoa, have
You're
I
in
been
the
sitting here
zone.
for 12 hours?
You're in the zone.
And it happens, you're in a zone.
Yes.
And that's great. It's great to hear you say that because that's what I try to teach writers. I can't teach them how to write, but if I can show them how to get into a zone, they will write, the characters will write the story for them.
And they do it so much better than I do.
So much
I let
better.
the characters go.
Yeah.
They take me to places, they take themselves to
Yep.
places that I couldn't bring them.
Connections get made.
Yes, they
that
do.
I don't even know. I mean, I had no idea. I'll tell you the honest truth. There have been times when I made myself cry.
Yes.
I'm
Yes.
sitting there to cry. I can't believe. You know, in I shouldn't give this away, but I will. In Flowers by the Roadside, there's a scene where his dog dies, and now he's been no, actually, I think that was Jimmy Loves Mary, a book that I'm doing now. After a while,
I know. They
yeah,
were cool.
I have a hard time remembering what was real and what was in one of my books.
I do too.
And now I've written like 12 of them. And there was a scene when this is the dog that's been with him forever. And when that dog died, and he gets up on the bed with him, and he holds the body, and he cries into the dog's fur, and he apologizes because he wasn't home when it happened. I was like crushed.
Yes.
And I mean, I wrote it, but I didn't know what was coming. I didn't see it coming.
Because
And
the
it came.
characters inform you.
The
That's
characters inform you.
Yes.
Even dogs.
yes.
And that's the real writing. There's a connection in writing that just helps you be the writer you need to be. So, you teach writing to your kids?
I do.
I
I
want to
tell-
give a shout out to those fifth graders?
Hi, Mrs. Oswald's class. I'm a pretty tough critic with editing and spelling
Good.
and punctuation.
Sometimes you
but
have to be.
But I tell them I'm doing this because I just had to have the book reprinted because
Yeah.
I found a dear friend of mine found some errors. So I want
Yeah.
you to learn from my mistakes.
I tell the students, writing's easy. Rewriting is hard.
Revising, editing.
And being able to edit your work, being able to stand back and say, yo, it doesn't work.
Yes.
You need to redo this chapter. It doesn't fit. And it's hard sometimes to make those changes. Students say to me, do you reread your book when you write it? I said, about 100 times.
Yes.
You know, and you have to, you keep going over it and over it and over it, and you still find mistakes.
I don't find my own. I need another
Yeah,
set of eyes.
I don't go back and read my books hardly ever because I'm afraid
So
that I'm
am
going to
I.
find mistakes.
So am I.
They
Same
say
thing.
no. I know it. And simple things like a word missing.
I know. Yes.
How in the world did I miss that? And how did the editor miss that?
I think we go blind to our own writing, and then
Yeah.
finally, when a
We
new
see
person,
what we want to see.
yes,
And you go in and you read right over that line.
it's-
It drives me nuts when, someone reads it and they go, you left out a word here. And I said, no. I say, yeah.
Yes.
Oh my God, how could I miss that 100 times? And everybody else who read it missed it.
that's what I tell
But it
my
happens.
students, that you just
Yeah.
need exchange papers with a friend, and I'll help you. But to teach these students to be independent editors and be able to revise, I think it's an important skill.
It's very important. To teach a child to be a writer is difficult because writing is a talent, but there are certain things that you can teach children that will help them be the writer they need to be. Some of these writers just have not found themselves yet. And we have to teach children how to experiment. Stick your neck out. Find out who you are. Are you a poet? Are you a novelist? There's so many different kinds of writing. What would you be best in? Well, it depends. As English teachers, I was an English teacher for years, and one of the things I needed to do for my students was to give them a smorgasbord of writing.
Yes.
Let them see different kinds of writers, different kinds of writing, and find out what connects with them. Get them into their own zone. Not every zone is the same. You have to find who you are as a writer.
Yes.
And that's crucial. So your job as a teacher is to do that. I say, my job isn't to give you my answers. It's to give you your questions. Let you find out what works for you, where to write, when to write, how to write, what kind of stories. And that's important. Okay, so believe it or not, we're counting down here. Main message for some of those young writers out there who are struggling to be who they are.
Stick with it. Stick with it.
Don't give up.
This took 22 years. So stick with it, and it's going to come. There's going to be times when you
want to quit.
When you want to quit, there's going to be times when you get a lot of rejection letters. There's going to be times when you just don't have time to write.
Don't take it all to heart. Be tough-skinned.
No. Yes.
If there's 10 people who say this book is awful, there's probably 10 people out there who will say it's great. Maybe you had the first 10 first. So you've got to keep going, and you've got to believe.
Yes, in yourself, definitely.
Yep, believe in yourself, and don't be afraid to share it. And the teacher's not always right.
Nope. I tell my students I make a mistake
S.E.
every day.
wrote The Outsiders. She got a C.
Yes.
And it sold million sellers.
It does.
So you've got to believe in yourself. And writing workshops.
I'm starting one.
Good.
Yes, I'm starting
Good.
one.
And you'll be coming to mine. And
Yes.
You've been there before.
I've been there before, and I'm coming back.
Coming back.
Yes.
And I'm glad to hear that.
Yes.
That's at the Mahopec Library. Every Thursday from 6:45 to 8:45. Final words. You writing a new book?
I am writing a new book.
Yeah.
Yes, I'm 100 pages into the sequel.
Wonderful.
Yes.
Based in Brewster again?
Yes, it is.
Wonderful.
It's her next year at
Is it
at
a
Haviland.
sequel?
It's a sequel.
Great.
She's at Haviland, and she's
Great.
a junior, but she's going to be going to Manhattan and Albany.
Terrific.
So, exciting.
Okay, so I believe we're counting down. We're pretty close to the end. I want to thank you for tuning in, and I certainly want to thank you.
Thank you
You're
so
a
much.
great guest,
Thank
a
you.
great writer. Keep doing what you're doing. Keep sharing it. One more shout out to your school.
Hypoquoniconk Elementary.
Wonderful. Keep doing what you're doing. Teaching children is so important. Inspiring them the importance of writing. Readers are leaders. Writers are fighters. Fighting to say what must be said. Thank you for tuning in. Thank you for being here and being with us. Tune in. We'll have other great writers, other great times, one-on-one. Thank you for being here.